In the late 19th century, social standing was often a matter of carefully maintained appearances, but in Mrs. Alex. McVeigh Miller's novel, Dainty's Cruel Rivals, or The Fatal Birthday, those appearances are a thin veil for something much more predatory. The story begins in Richmond, Virginia, with a young woman named Dainty Chase. Dainty is exactly what her name suggests: gentle, timid, and perhaps a little too innocent for the world she inhabits. She is the target of intense, simmering jealousy from her cousins, Olive and Ela. To the outside world they are family, but in private they are competitors. Their goal is simple: they want the affection and the massive fortune of Lovelace Ellsworth, a wealthy heir. To ensure Dainty doesn't stand in their way, they plot to sabotage her trip to visit her aunt's estate in West Virginia, hoping to strand her and leave the path clear for their own social climbing. Their plan, however, hits an immediate snag. On the train journey, Lovelace himself arrives and offers to escort Dainty, sparking an instant romantic connection that the cousins find impossible to ignore. As the group arrives at the Ellsworth estate, the atmosphere shifts from social maneuvering to something much darker. Aunt Judith, the matriarch of the family, is a woman of cold pragmatism. She sees her nieces not as family members to be nurtured, but as assets to be married off into wealth. This sets the stage for a campaign of psychological and physical terror against Dainty. The cousins don't just rely on whispers, they turn to outright superstition and fear. Dainty is haunted by a ghostly monk, a figure that appears out of nowhere, causing her to faint in terror. While Lovelace, ever the skeptic, dismisses these hauntings as nothing more than childish pranks or tricks of the light, the danger becomes very real when a man named Vernon Ashley enters the picture. Vernon is a volatile man and a former lover of the social climbing Ela. When he realizes he has no chance of winning her, his obsession turns to violence. During a heated confrontation, Vernon shoots Lovelace in the temple before he is taken away by the authorities. The shooting should have been the end of the chaos, but it only triggers a deeper conspiracy. With Lovelace wounded, Aunt Judith, Olive, and Ela form a secret, unholy alliance to destroy Dainty entirely. They move from psychological games to elaborate deceptions. They hire a fake gypsy fortune-teller to prophesy Dainty's death, and they even have a woman in a black gown break into her room to physically attack her in her sleep. Lovelace, sensing that Dainty is in genuine danger, tries to protect her by installing a bell alarm on her door, but the villains are already several steps ahead. On what should have been a day of celebration, the ultimate betrayal occurs. Dainty and her mother are drugged and kidnapped. In their place, the villains leave a forged note claiming that Dainty has eloped with a lover, a move designed to destroy her reputation and ensure she can never return to polite society. What the villains don't know is that Dainty and Lovelace had actually secretly married weeks earlier to protect her inheritance. This secret marriage becomes the only thing standing between Dainty and total ruin, but the villains are relentless. Dainty is imprisoned in a dungeon, and the ghostly monk is revealed to be a mercenary named Sheila Kelly, hired specifically to terrorize her. In a final, desperate attempt to dispose of the evidence, Dainty is poisoned with laudanum and left by a roadside, staged to look like a suicide. But the story takes a turn toward the miraculous. A violent summer storm rolls in, and a bolt of lightning strikes near Dainty's body. The shock of the event, combined with the sheer force of nature, seems to revive her from her near-death state. She wanders into the wilderness, lost and broken, until she eventually finds refuge in a remote logging camp. As she recovers, she discovers a truth that changes everything. She is pregnant with Lovelace's child. While Dainty is fighting for survival in the woods, Lovelace is fighting for his mind. He survived the gunshot wound to the head, but the injury left him in a state of total amnesia. He wanders the world as what people call a harmless idiot, having lost all memory of his identity, his wealth, or the woman he loves. It is here that the novel takes a fascinating turn toward the cutting edge of 19th century science. The story moves away from the realm of ghosts and shadows and into the light of medical progress. Doctors use the newly discovered technology of the X-ray to look inside Lovelace's skull. They locate the bullet that had been lodged in his brain, and the procedure successfully restores his intellect and his memory. As Lovelace regains himself, the fog of the conspiracy begins to lift. He is provided with crucial evidence by Ailsa Scott and Mrs. Middleton, the widow of the minister who performed his secret wedding. They produce the original marriage certificate, the one piece of paper that proves Dainty is not a runaway or a disgraced woman, but a legally wedded wife. With his memory and his legal standing restored, Lovelace finds Dainty, who has been living in hiding with their child. They return to the Ellsworth estate not as victims, but as the rightful owners of their lives. They confront the villains, exposing the kidnapping, the arson, and the attempted murder. The web of lies is unraveled, the villains are banished, and the story concludes with a sense of restored order. Dainty and Lovelace are reunited, and even Dainty's mother, who had lost her mind in the trauma, eventually regains her sanity. When we look back at this story, it's easy to see it as a classic melodrama, but there is a lot to unpack in how Mrs. Miller structures her world. One of the most striking elements is the theme of appearance versus reality. The Ellsworth family presents an image of impeccable social standing and respectability, yet their private lives are defined by criminal conspiracy and cold-blooded malice. The novel constantly asks us to look past the finery and the high society manners to see the corruption underneath. Dainty herself represents this struggle. Her modest and quiet nature is actually her greatest strength, allowing her to survive the very things that would have broken a more aggressive person. There is also a fascinating tension between the old world and the new. For much of the book, the characters are fighting against things that seem almost supernatural: ghosts, omens, and divine providence. The villains use superstition as a weapon to manipulate Dainty's mind, but the resolution of the plot doesn't come from a miracle or a ghost, it comes from science. The use of the X-ray is a brilliant narrative choice. It acts as a literal and metaphorical tool that pierces through the fog of the various deceptions. It's the triumph of modern objective truth over the shadows of the past. It suggests that while humans can lie and manipulate, the physical truth of the world, the facts that can be seen and measured, will eventually come to light. This leads into another central theme: the fragility of a woman's reputation. In the late 19th century, a woman's social standing was her most valuable and most vulnerable possession. The villains understand this perfectly. They know they don't have to kill Dainty to destroy her, they only have to make the world believe she has acted dishonorably. The forged note and the threat of a shameful pregnancy are weapons as lethal as any gun. The novel highlights how easily a person's character can be dismantled by gossip and perceived scandal, making Dainty's journey one of not just physical survival, but a fight to reclaim her very identity. We also see a constant tug-of-war between human malice and what the author presents as divine providence. There is a sense that the universe has a moral compass. When Dainty is left for dead, the lightning strike feels less like a random weather event and more like a cosmic intervention. The narrative seems to argue that while humans can be incredibly cruel and can temporarily mask the truth, there is a natural order that eventually corrects itself. The miraculous survival of Dainty and the recovery of Lovelace's mind serve to reinforce the idea that truth is a force of nature that cannot be suppressed forever. Ultimately, Dainty's Cruel Rivals is a story about the resilience of the human spirit in the face of overwhelming, coordinated cruelty. Dainty starts the book as a woman who seems easily crushed by the world, but she ends it as a survivor who has endured kidnapping, poisoning, and social exile. Her strength isn't found in aggression, but in her ability to endure and eventually find her way back to the truth. It's a high-stakes, often extreme tale, but it captures a very real anxiety of its time: the fear that the world is a place where appearances are everything, and that the truth is something that must be fought for, often through the most harrowing of circumstances.